Welcome to TNT Live. I know it's been a while, but here we are this week as we've got all the news. Justin Trudeau drowning, Patrick Brown, baby Trudeau, also drowning, and, all the crazy laws they're bringing into. But we will start with our friends, our good friends, deep, lifelong friendship bonds Wyatt and I have with the Federal Liberal Party. Mutual love flowing between both parties. Just exponentially, they love us, we love them, but they're in trouble right now because they suck and they're horrible. So where do you want to start on the Liberal scandals?
It's probably best to go in chronological order because after the 2021 election, it looked like unless the Conservatives get a much better leader, they're going to be screwed in the sense that the Liberals tend to have that 30-40% hold on most Ontario ridings, so it's going to be extremely hard to dig them out of Parliament without something big changing. Freedom Convoy happened, Aaron O'Toole's gone, and then Justin Trudeau decides right after that to just shoot himself directly in the foot through the Emergency Act invocation, just assuming for whatever reason that he was just going to be allowed to get away with it, that nobody was going to ask any questions. I assumed he thought that it was going to be controversial for the Conservatives to talk about to the point that they were never going to challenge him. But currently, we're in the Emergencies Act scandal. We're in Trudeau's fake COVID scandal. We're in the Brenda Lucki scandal, and we're in the fact that Jagmeet Singh is the worst person to ever make an alliance with ever, and Trudeau's now being weighed down by the unpopularity of Jagmeet Singh to the point that Jagmeet Singh's own brother lost his re-election campaign in Brampton during the Ontario election. So I don't know. I guess maybe we'll start at the beginning there, maybe with the Emergencies Act.
Yeah, this is like the biggest scandal. SNC-Lavalin was huge, and I've always explained it, the different things, and how bad SNC-Lavalin was, and how it was really underplayed. But the Emergencies Act one is exponentially worse, I think. And there's invoking it, which is criminal itself, but then there's another level of the way it was invoked and the lies surrounding it, which is I'm not sure which one is they're equally super terrible. And it's amazing how they're both significantly worse than SNC-Lavalin, which SNC-Lavalin was Justin Trudeau essentially trying to become a dictator by merging all the powers of government into his office, and in order to do political favors for friends who gave him money to do so. So that's, if Trump had done that, there would have been he would have been put up in front of a firing squad, and it would have been live on CNN had Trump done SNC-Lavalin. But Justin Trudeau kind of skated through that. Then we had blackface, which is sort of your classic one. But you have the Emergencies Act. And the big thing now is they were lying when they said law enforcement told them they needed the Emergencies Act. And it turns out that under oath, every law enforcement officer and official and leader said, no, we never asked for the Emergencies Act. Because as we all know, they didn't need the Emergencies Act. They wanted the Emergencies Act to do it. And now there's the invocation of the Emergencies Act to quell a peaceful protest using violence against peaceful protesters, which, I was there firsthand and I saw, and that's horrible. And I'm not sure, is that worse or is on the same level of explicitly lying to Parliament and the people in order to invoke emergency powers?
I think this is the worst part of it, and this we talked about this a little bit before we came on. The benefit, and it sounds weird to say this, the benefit that Justin Trudeau got from SNC-Lavalin is that it was an exciting scandal. It made him a character in a certain sense. There was it was complicated, so there wasn't, when I say complicated, it wasn't really that complicated. But there
the
was
media did the thing where they said, it's so complicated, guys, you won't understand it.
There's enough detail.
Explain it to you.
There's enough detail the media can make it seem like it's a little bit gray when it's really not. There's detail, but it all makes him look bad if you interpret it correctly. But that one was, to a certain extent, it's a bit of a fun scandal. Justin Trudeau is seen going from room to room. He looks like a manipulator. He looks like he's in control, and he's being able to pit people against each other. He's throwing at Rempel, and he's replacing her with Lemieux? What was his last name? I don't even know. Some boring guy, some boring bald guy is now our AG. But that one made Trudeau look good in kind of like a fun villain kind of a way. The Emergencies Act one is not even fun for the Liberals or anything. It doesn't even make Trudeau look particularly like sinister in like a intellectual way. He just like, they just lied. The RCMP said they lied. So where do they go from here? Like Marco Mendocino, the public safety minister, tried to then do, well, you know, there was fires being lit by the truckers, so that's why we did it. And it's like, that was a lie too. Again, and the lies are so cut and dry. It's a lie. You can't hide behind anything, that they just die on arrival. And that's kind of why this is so damaging for him. And even more so is the Brenda Lucky RCMP commissioner scandal, because it's just openly like she's like asking people within the RCMP, hey, can you tell me what the make and model of those firearms are so we can start trying to ban them? It's insane. And there's no place anyone can hide behind these things. But Justin Trudeau will try, because he either had COVID but then decided to go on a trip in like a week's time anyways after he got it, or he doesn't have COVID and he's just trying to hide and let Marco Mendocino just get like destroyed live on TV, and then so he can throw him under the bus and get rid of him.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up a good point, I guess, before we were on air, of like the difference in the scandals, and you know, the fact that now there's a contingent of anti-Trudeau Liberals, like, you know. So
I got to do the.
So yeah, look there. Yeah, so you brought up the point that the fact that Joel Lightbaum, like during the EA, could publicly disagree with Trudeau and not get kicked out is really big, because we saw in SNC-Lavalin, like Jody Wilson-Raybould, Indigenous woman, right? When like the messaging of the media and the Liberal Party is women are better than men and Indigenous people are better than the average. You're right. The intersectional hierarchy, like black beats white, you know, Asian beats white, black beats Asian, right? There's a chart somewhere, right? You know, like religious, like, you know, Muslim here, Christian there. Where are you on the religious spectrum of intersectional victimhood? She was an Indigenous woman. This is basically God. And a liberal Indigenous woman. She doesn't have a real conservative ideological bone in her body. Jody Wilson-Raybould will never come on this show and talk about the need for equality over equity. That's not her philosophical belief. But Trudeau was able to can her and Jane Philpott, who was one of his like most well-respected and competent ministers at the time. You know, had that, I'm not a politician, I was a doctor lady who just believed in the cause and is getting into it. Like, he kicked them both out. Two very high-profile women in his caucus that are very high positions during SNC-Lavalin to sort of cover this up, and everyone was just like, "Oh, that's the power of Trudeau." Now, the fact that, you know, standard MPs can be like, "Okay, we're actually going to publicly go against you and keep our spots because you don't have the political capital to throw us out," is a very interesting development. So it shows that at least internally, Justin Trudeau does not have the internal strength in the Liberal Party to go full Justin Trudeau, which is an interesting point that we're at here with all these scandals. And you brought it correctly that SNC-Lavalin, although it wasn't that complicated, because it needed some context that people explain to actually what it was, because people don't intuitively know SNC-Lavalin scandal. Okay, what was it? It was like, was it a lobbying thing? Was it a government corruption thing? It was sort of an everything scandal. But with the new scandals in the EA Act, it's very straightforward. It's like the Emergencies Act. Okay, that was the police on the streets. He lied to invoke it. They said law enforcement asked for it. Law enforcement says they never asked for it. So it looks like they lied and made things up and justified force against Canadians. Like, this is pretty intuitive for everyone to understand. It doesn't need to be explained to them. So this is why it's worse. And then also you're dealing with the fact that he doesn't have the strong internal support of all his homies.
And the problems, part of the problem is he's having to lean on Jagmeet Singh right now. So he literally cannot afford to lose any Liberal MPs, because not only is he in a minority, but his ability to even pass legislation or not immediately go back to another election is based on a guy who's extremely unpopular. So who might get thrown out as the NDP later. So he has to kind of keep as many MPs in his on his side as humanly possible, even if some of those MPs actively want to get rid of him. And this is sort of like a media rumor, but it was one that where everyone basically knew it was true. It was complete, like everyone knew it was true, just no one would ever come out on the record and say it. That about 30 MPs during the Freedom Convoy from the Liberal caucus were pushing to get rid of Justin Trudeau, and Justin Trudeau essentially to ward off a challenge to his leadership, invokes the Emergencies Act to kind of raise the stakes so much that there might be another election if they don't go along with him and essentially support him through this. So he essentially warded off a minor threat of a challenge to his leadership by causing a massive gaping hole in his leadership with this stupid Emergencies Act scandal, where he doesn't really benefit anything from it in terms of the Emergencies Act didn't win him any support. It just ended up, I think, making him very tired, because I feel like leaders, when they come out of a chaotic situation like the Emergencies Act or like the Freedom Convoy with them breaking it up with the police, I think that was the moment where Canadians just found Justin Trudeau to be like a really tired political leader, even though he's not really been around nearly as long as some other prime ministers have.
Yeah, I mean, the shtick is sort of getting old, where he responds to everything with vague platitudes, and then when there's criticism of him, he immediately goes to, well, it's because they're the deplorable route. They're evil, they're racist, sexist, homophobic, and I will, anyone who disagrees with me is like. But he's now at the point where if you're paying attention, about 80% of Canadians have been called racist, transphobic, sexist, evil bigots by Justin Trudeau at some point or another for disagreeing with him. Whether you're a doctor or farmer who doesn't like his tax laws, that's racism, right? Whether you're a woman who doesn't like the fact that men convicted of rape will then say, I'm a woman, and then be put in federal penitentiaries, that makes you a racist or a sexist or a transphobe, right? So we're now at the point where, like, sort of everyone who's been paying attention has been called evil by Justin Trudeau. And I think we're also dealing with a very different Canada than the 2019, because Canada's always been a very go with the flow country, if I can say, in certain ways, in the sense that not as politically up in arms about everything as Americans, right? Just peace and good governance, and just, we want it to be very boring, and we don't like making any noise, and we just want everyone to be nice and tamped down and nothing too crazy. And that was kind of Canadian mentality. But then COVID hit, and then, having a passive population, like either one way or another, right? You either got radicalized by saying, oh my God, COVID's going to kill us all, and there's people not getting their vaccines, they're going to kill us all, what do we do about this? Or you said, what the hell is the government doing? The government has taken over every aspect of our lives, locked us down in our rooms over what? Like the super snivels at best, right? So I think we're dealing with a much different Canada from the 2019 SNC Lavalin, where people were trained to just ignore Canadian scandals and listen to the American ones. Whereas now, like, okay, no, people in Canada kind of realize, like, okay, this stuff is kind of important. Like, it will affect me.
Well, here's another thing, and this is why I brought up the 30 Liberal MPs who were said to want to have gotten rid of him back in February, is that I've noticed that during past scandals, every Liberal stands up and they're like, I love Justin Trudeau, I'm a committed member of the Liberal Party, and they will like defend him to the absolute hilt. Right now, I do not notice that many actual Liberals standing up to defend anything that's going on with Justin Trudeau right now. I think that there's a lot of MPs just sort of sitting back saying, okay, Justin, you and your inner circle, like Omar Alghabra, Marco Mendocino, some of your other cabinet ministers, Chrystia Freeland, you guys get to deal with this. We'll see you in 2 months if you're around anymore. And just, we're kind of done with it. And try and call us out for not helping you out. It's not going to work out well. Because what's Trudeau really going to do if the Joel Lightbound types in the Liberal Party aren't defending him? Was he going to stand up and say, I'm embroiled in a scandal and these people refuse to get up and risk their political hides to defend me? He has no ability to actually club any of these people into doing what he wants, which it might be the most genius move for all the Liberals to just sort of, I guess they'll vote when he wants them to vote, but they're not going to say anything in between the votes.
Yeah, and the good news, bad news is, like, this deal that Trudeau made with Jagmeet, it will ultimately be the end of him. And it will hurt the Liberals and the NDP. They will be in a very, very bad situation. Both parties actually lose from this deal long term, which is good. Now, both leaders personally benefit, Justin and Jagmeet. It probably will help them maintain power until 2025, but then after that, they do so much personal and professional damage that they sort of bring the house down around them, which is good. But then I think good timing, Irene here. But for stuff like this, it's good that they'll follow it. But we need to stop Bill C11 and 16 needs to stop. But I agree. There's these very, very horrible laws that they put on the book. This was a great segue for Patrick Brown stuff. So we'll skip Iron and Gold Star. There is the problem of more C11 coming through, right? He has the power until 2025. So expect as much woke nonsense, to put it lightly, as they can get away with in 2025. So it becomes a war of can we create some, like these laws being so unpalatable to the defectors within the NDP and the Liberal Party that it might actually push them to realize, okay, even if we go coalition building, like this will like there are things that will fracture coalitions in the parties. Like there's only so much things. Like one of the reasons Aaron O'Toole was deposed is like, one, certain people brought up certain irregularities with Aaron O'Toole back in the day. And two, one of the things that he sort of sacrificed his political capital on internally was there was the vote, I believe, on C4, which is like the conversion therapy law, right? Conversion therapy, like what the left tries to do, and the Canadian Liberals aren't the kings of this, is pretend conversion therapy is hooking up a gay man to electroshock therapy, and every time he looks at a picture of like, Superman, in a Speedo, you shock him, and then you show him Wonder Woman and you give him, like, that's conversion therapy in 1852. That doesn't happen. What the Liberals are trying to institute as conversion therapy is you bring your 6-year-old son into a psych's office. He says, "I'm a girl," and then you say, whoa, hold the brakes there. That's conversion therapy in Canada. It's saying hold the brakes there, not immediately cutting his dick off. This is now conversion therapy. So O'Toole whipped the party and forced all the MPs to vote for this. Like there was a very thing like, and O'Toole sacrificed a lot of political capital to do that, but he made a lot of enemies, and a lot of the SoCons are pissed, and a lot of people who will have to then go back and potentially lose their seats in their ridings or get primaried out because of this. Well, they'd wanted O'Toole out. So when the opportunity came with the truckers, and there's more people mad at him, you had this coalition already built of anti-O'Toole, and then you had this sparking, inciting incident of the trucker protest that pushed him over the edge. So you have the potential of something like this happening within the Liberal Party, where the coalition...
I think it's a bit different. I think what happens is that a lot of the Liberals would still say, I like 85% of Trudeau's policies, but then they would think that the problem with the chaos and the scandals is that even though Trudeau's always going to retain his seat and maybe will always be able to take home a minority government or 80% shot every election, we still somehow win. It's just that it makes it extremely hard for Liberals to hold on to their seats. The Liberals' seats are very random in terms of which ones they win. They can always usually cobble something together, but there's a lot of only one-term Liberal MPs in Quebec and only one-term MPs in Ontario. Like 30% of the Liberal MPs every single election are completely different that enter the next caucus. And I think a lot of people are like fighting for their own careers here, where they recognize that Justin Trudeau makes it completely random whether they get in office or not.
Yeah, and so I'll add to, like, I kind of agree with you. I'm going to go back to my original point of like the fraction, like the reason why these coalitions against the leader kind of build up is Wyatt right. Like there's people who have hot seats and they need to win them. So this is like the political pressure, right? That when an MP, like politicians are, it's not like they're standing up for ideological reasons. Like Trudeau's gone too far, I have to stop him because it's the right thing to do. No, they realize I have to look like I have to stand up and stop him because it's the right thing to do, because I'll lose my seat if I don't. They're self-interested, calculating reptiles. But there are a lot of, it's funny, the type of voter that the Conservative Party thinks exists in the GTA is actually like a Liberal voter, and they think this guy can be swayed to the Conservative Party. And the type of voter that Patrick Brown says he can get, and that the Conservative Party is so focused on, that doesn't really exist, we talked about, is sort of this, upper middle class Toronto GTA type voter who's like, fiscally conservative, socially liberal, like I just want, but this person actually is ultimately thinking between, Liberal and NDP, right? But votes Liberal because he's much more moderate and reasonable. A lot of those people, they might swing CPC or not vote or go green, because if they think the Liberals or the NDP are associated, the NDP is too radical. Like there is that type of voter within the Liberal Party that thinks the NDP is too radical. Like they're liberals, they're they're leftists, so they don't really know how to describe themselves, but they'd be like, I'm a liberal, but I'm not a socialist. That's the easiest way of putting it out. So you risk this big voting block. Now, a lot of these people don't flip conservative, but
even if 3 or 4% of them do, that it starts flipping seats.
Yeah, it flips the seats. Like the actual swing voter between red and blue, when the reds make the alliance with the orange, they're more likely to go blue. So let's say the purple voter, right? The liberal MPs that rely on the purple voter, they're all hurt by this NDP alliance.
That might get confusing with the PPC thing.
Oh yeah,
might want to be pink voters.
Yeah,
or something.
I mean, you combine red and blue, you get purple. So that's kind of what I mean. But yeah, we're not talking about PPC. Let's say they're off the establishment map. So we're talking about like people who swing between red and blue, liberal, conservative. They can be swung blue if the liberals make a deal with the NDP. So this puts a lot of politicians liberals who rely on the purple voter, they now have incentive to get Justin Trudeau out and end this coalition, not because it will destroy the party long term, but because it will make them lose their seat and their potential pension. Like, this is how politicians make decisions. So anything that exacerbates the cracks and puts more liberals in a position where certain policies will lose them seats, this has the potential to push it over the edge and oust Trudeau before 2025.
And I think that's a great transition point for us to go talking about Patrick Brown, because I would say that the reason why Patrick Brown is crashing so hard is, to use the sort of like different types of voters, like metaphor or example, it's that Patrick Brown is saying to the base, guys, we're the blue party, but guess what? We can win the next election only with purple voters. We can somehow only win soft liberals and somehow cruise that to victory, hoping that enough blue voters like stick around, which is literally the exact same calculus that Aaron O'Toole, Andrew Scheer, and even kind of Stephen Harper were operating on the past 3 elections. So I don't know how this keeps happening, but we literally keep having the same like 3 or 4 candidates enter the race, all saying, guys, how about we just keep doing what we did the last few elections, where we just betray the base and hopefully they don't get too ticked off with us, and hopefully we cruise to victory. And I don't know, it's just, I like kind of watching Patrick Brown's implosion, because it's been an example of every single thing I would say that's a horrible strategy in politics. At the same time that I just don't like Patrick Brown, I want him to see him lose, especially considering of how condescending he's been to like the Pierre Poilievre campaign so far.
Yeah, I remember when Patrick Brown was the leader on Ontario, and Brendan and I would go to like the meetings and like try and cover it or look, because we were like making conservative YouTube videos and all that stuff. So, but I remember going to those Patrick Brown meetings and have them literally say to us, guys, we cannot stand on our principles, because if we do, the CPC will write something negative about us, and then we can't do anything. And you're like, yes, you can. You just have to not give a shit, you idiots. But they weren't capable of that. So there's a great symmetry to the way Patrick Brown was taken out. But the line Patrick Brown would give you is, well, listen, if you want one thing, vote for me. I'll kick the Liberals out and I'll do one good thing. But you're not going to get any good things with the Liberals. I'll have to do all the things the Liberals are doing, but I'll also do one good thing. I'll lower taxes a little bit. I'll curb spending slightly. And you won't get that so that's the thing. Now, to go with, so Wyatt sort of outlined the sort of the push Conservative Party always has is for these purple voters, these swing voters, and bring the purple voters to our side, and that will help us defeat the Liberals. And it makes sense intuitively if you think of it from that perspective. But there's a whole other type of voter that they are not counting on, and that is the white voter or the gray voter. And I've just invented it. But I think white is spicier, so we'll call it the white voter. Just so everyone panics a bit.
If anyone jumps into the stream past this, they'll think this is a very different type of publication.
Yeah, I just want the National Telegraph said the white voter is the most important in Canada, and we could probably switch to gray, so it's whatever. But what I mean by gray or white is this is someone. The purple voter is like, am I liberal or am I conservative, right? And I can see the value in both, and these people do exist. Right, there's that sort of swing between liberal and conservative. There's the swing between liberal and NDP. You have the people like, oh, I like the NDP now, but now I like the Liberals. There are people deciding between liberal and NDP. There's people deciding between liberal and conservative. There's people deciding between conservative and PPC. The sort of and the people who exist, slightly to the right of the base of the CPC, slightly to the left of the base of the PPC. These people always exist in politics. But in the modern era, there's something that is more important, and these are the white or gray voters. These are the people who just want to be inspired. They don't have a political party loyalty, but they just want to see something, and they can be won over by a politician, not a political party. And Pierre Poilievre has the ability to win white or gray voters. And in order to win, these are people who are like, the PPC got a lot of these people. The PPC got a lot of, whites or grays, not, they took people from the conservatives who are like, they're not conservative anymore. But there's a lot of people with like some socialist ideas, but like the PPC was just the first people saying X, Y, and Z. Whereas Poilievre, with his ability to communicate, put issues out there, right? There's people who are like suffering from inflation, and Poilievre has the ability to be like, you're not a political person. You're not usually paying attention to stuff. But here, I can make you understand and care about this thing like inflation in 5 minutes, and then you're a Poilievre voter, right? So white voters or blank voters can become Poilievre voters, can become Trudeau voters. And that's where you can win the election, is on that.
You could also define those gray or white voters as people who actually value sincerity. If people are very swayable between who they'll vote for,
yes,
or if they don't vote much at all. So, like, let's say white voters are the people who go with anyone, gray voters are the ones who just don't really vote all that often. They tend to value sincerity. Like, if you ever know people who tend to vote very randomly election to election, I always find that the thing that they highlight the most is, I like that guy. He's nice. He seems like he knows what he's talking about. They don't have a particularly ideological stance on issues, but they would look at someone like Pierre Poilievre as being like, well, that guy seems like he actually gets it. That guy seems like he actually understands the problems I'm having. I don't even need to know the answers he's giving. Like, I don't even need to know I don't even need to understand what he's talking about, but I can tell he cares about the issues. He wants to dig into it and help me out. Whereas with Patrick Brown, the guy is so transparently a membership salesman that he's not actually going to be the type of guy who wants to talk to you about any particular policy. He's going to be the guy who's very condescending, gets your vote, and says, just understand that I know what I'm talking about. Just trust me, kind of stuff.
Let the experts take care of it, guys. I'm Patrick Brown, and I know some very fancy people, and let the experts take care of it. And meanwhile, the way he's going to memberships, he's going to, all these different communities playing identity politics and saying, well, the Tamils, what's your thing? Oh, you want this? Okay, we'll do that. Right? Going to mosque, this, synagogue, this, church, this, right? Promising every little identity group their own personal thing. And listen, if Patrick Brown, if you were in a mosque and Patrick Brown promised you something, odds are he promised to do the exact opposite somewhere else within the last 3 months. So maybe he cares more about you, but he's lying to you or someone else. So just know that any policy promise, if you're part of any group, if you're a Sikh or a Hindu or whatever, and Patrick Brown came into your temple and promised you something, he probably was pretty convincing. He probably knew the issue quite well, because Patrick Brown's been doing this for years. But he probably went into a different temple or a synagogue or a church and promised the exact opposite to someone else to sell memberships. And it's so funny.
And I think that you don't even need to know that he does that to just see that the type of person he is, the way he talks, that's the type of thing that he would do. Whereas Pierre is much more someone who talks very sincerely. And I would even apply the same thing to Leslie Lewis. Much different personality from Pierre, but I still would say that she actually exudes sincerity.
Yeah,
like Pierre does, even though she doesn't exactly have the same energy that Pierre does.
She does exude sincerity, but when you put her in a debate setting, her skills break down. But
it's too much sincerity, and it comes off as cheesy.
Well, it's not sincerity; it's just she's out of their depth. Like, you think she'd be better at arguing as a lawyer? I don't know if she did much trial law or whatever, but she just doesn't have the dynamic public speaking skills to carry the emotion you want to a wider audience. But that's the thing. Patrick Brown got tossed from the provincial PC. Why I wouldn't vote for the Confederate Conservatives. Now, Brown getting tossed out, remember before this, it was a fake Me Too scandal. Like, Patrick Brown was taken down by a fake Me Too scandal that was obviously BS. And it's like he kissed a girl, and then a year later she didn't like it, and it was so clearly nothing. Like, the real take, if anything there, it's like Patrick Brown likes young women, really young women, and that's that's creepy.
A little creepy, but it's not illegal.
Creepy, but not illegal. Okay, I'm in my 30s now. if I were to date an 18-year-old girl, not illegal, but I hope you would lose some respect for me. Like, I hope you would look at me and go, right?
Anyway,
that's the type of people I would.
But the fake Me Too scandal was like perfect timing for the PCs who wanted to get rid of Patrick Brown without having to admit that the reason they were getting rid of him because of the nomination election rigging, was from him just flip-flopping on every single policy, him disrespecting social conservatives that he had used to be able to get elected as leader. And they did that. They got rid of him on the stupid Me Too thing and not the internal corruption, because they wanted their next leader, Doug Ford, to be able to do the exact same thing, and nobody can complain. They could act as if they reformed the party without actually touching any of the real issues.
Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. Is, yeah, Patrick Brown made a lot of enemies. He had alienated the base, and then that's why he got kicked out, is because they were looking for an excuse because he was so bad.
And I just want to jump over to just the way that Patrick Brown's been conducting himself in this leadership race, just to talk more about the leadership race itself, is that when I say that this is the exact way you shouldn't be running a leadership race, if you're the popular guy who has a righteous indignation, you can kind of go after the other candidates. It doesn't work for Patrick Brown because he's trying to put on this impression that he, like many of his insider supporters, are the slick, stylish, metropolitan Toronto guys, except he's just been a complete whiner the entire time, and he cannot pull off the I'm righteously indignant at the way that Pierre Poilievre acts. He just comes off like a red Tory who is sad that he's going to lose, and it's not been working out at all for him. Like, the funniest thing was when he said, I'm not going to run if Pierre Poilievre wins the leadership election, and everyone's like, great, leave now. It was pathetic.
Yeah, I think Gregory, it's a good point. Pierre would have to hammer the media subsidies so it becomes a talking point that Grays would know where he comes to the media attempt to discredit him. Yeah, that's a good thing. Like, stand up for yourself, right? Everyone has the thing. And then a prime example, of Bank of Canada thing, where the deputy governor ended up defending Pierre, right? Because he made it a thing and he stood his ground. And then we all had to, they couldn't just deny inflation forever. So, because Pierre was able to sort of weather a storm of a bunch of political pundits calling him an evil, crazy man for about a month, he ended up surviving that, right? And these are things especially with the media stuff, it's a great thing to hammer, because almost everyone has something with the media. Now, if you're watching alternative media, you have 8,000 things. You could get on here and you could start listing off things that you don't like about the media. But every kind of group these days has at least one thing where they realize the media is unfair to them on, the Jewish community, in my example, it's really funny to watch my family watch this, because we could go to Israel, right? Palestinian will go blow himself up in a supermarket, and it's 4 dead in Israel after it's they don't say terrorists, whatever, and the media will say oh, this hero who blew himself up in a peaceful demonstration of love in a super blah blah blah. They'll do that, right? But my point is, when I say, so we agree that the media outlets, let's say the Toronto Star, deliberately misrepresent what's going on in Israel for a political agenda. Yeah. And I go, is it so hard to believe that the same organization you're complaining about now would do the exact same thing to a different group of people on a different issue? And that's the way we're you can tell, because when we have these family discussions, it's Daniel versus the family, and then maybe an uncle quietly agreeing with me, and a few cousins who don't want to talk, right? That's the thing. But that's that got quiet. I guess so. That, when you put it to them in that way, so the media lies about your specific issue, right? And this is where you could do this at home, right? So that's for the Jewish community, right? We're always complaining that they treat Israel terrible, but so for me, I don't have any distance. I'm the same thing the Toronto Star does to Israel, they do to the truckers, because it doesn't fit their political narrative, right? You might have something that the media does to your specific group of whatever, the way media handles what relations is just wrong, right? So when you go to a group of people in that group, it's the media screws us over on this particular issue. Is it so difficult to imagine that they do this across the board? And this is where Pierre can make faces he wants to fight Bill C11, right? Go after the mainstream media, Like, you have the platform to do it. Be the hero to all these, people who feel like, oh, the big, like, and as a conservative, it's a great issue where, like, the liberals have built this image of they're fighting the big guy and they're the little guy. This is a great way to flip it. Oh, damn, my screen went off. So why can we still see me?
Yeah, we can still see you. Sorry. Daniel has this problem with his laptop where he's literally not able to see anything. Everything's black for him. He feels like his life is ending, but it doesn't matter because we can still hear him at least. Well,
Okay,
I just covered this a little bit.
If I'm looking down, everyone, this is just me getting this on my phone, so I can still read some comments if Wyatt brings them up. But
okay.
That's
Anyways,
why
I was just gonna say though, I just covered the thing today, although Facebook is still screwing me over with when it comes to post reach. But the whole Pierre Poilievre released a video today where he just went to a Passports Canada office and just walked in and demonstrated about how long the lines are, and it's like people would usually see going after government for being bad at its job as you're attacking government employees, you're doing this, you're doing that. Often you have to show exactly what you're talking about, or people can kind of weasel around what the issue is. So if you're talking about bureaucratic mismanagement, so that no one can say you're just attacking hardworking government employees. Like, no, Pierre Poilievre walked to the government office with a lawn chair to show how long the lines were at these passport offices. So that was a great move. And I think what he needs to then do with the media is put out videos of just him saying, hey, so we pay $1 billion for this garbage, and then show a clip of the CBC saying something that's verifiably false, and then show the retraction later or show what actually happened, and then just keep doing that. Make it like a 20-minute video of here's something the media said, here's what actually happened. We paid $1 billion for that. And keep kind of going
that's
at
a great
it
idea.
that way.
That's an absolute great idea.
And has Patrick Brown come out with any of this, just to end the topic of Patrick Brown? Patrick Brown has done nothing where I'm like, that is right. I can't believe no one's pointed that out yet. The only thing I think I agree with Patrick Brown on is Ukraine, which is odd, but I would even trust that he's actually telling the truth about what his personal position is. He's just trying to contrast on that one issue.
Yeah, he's trying to get the sort of Ukraine thing. Yeah, it's pretty transparent. So before we leave the topic of Patrick Brown, I think it's important to sort of, I think the point, I think you made it might have been before we went there, but Patrick Brown isn't selling, I'm not sure if you said it, he's not selling anything. He's just criticizing what Pierre is doing. So he looks salty, but that doesn't work unless you're selling something. That only works, criticizing, oh, Pierre's bad, if you're like, but I'm better, right? You're at 5-6%. You have no platform other than we're going to make the Tamil Tigers take them off the terrorist watch list, and we're going to be more friendly to Hezbollah the next time they get into war with Israel. Those are the only things that he's like, oh, that's where Patrick Brown's going on. So it's not like he has this great plan where he's like, this is my economic plan. It's sensible, and Pierre is crazy. Don't go Pierre. It's like that's.
What always annoys me to no end with Leadership Race is how basically nobody releases policies on absolutely anything unless forced to, because it's the hottest topic in the country. So they have to say what their policy is. I can name actual Pierre Poilievre policies. I can name Leslie Lewis policies. I can barely name some Jean Charest policies. There is nothing coming from Patrick Brown. I'm not even sure if he intended that he was going to jump in this race and try and win, but now he's just trying to act the spoiler against against Pierre Poilievre and hope that he can pump up Jean Charest enough, even though it seems like Jean Charest is also kind of doing the same thing for Patrick Brown. I don't really get the strategy, but even if Patrick Brown's own team's falling apart right now.
Conservative Party. I think they're either this is a crazed power quest by a megalomaniacal lunatic who's so deluded in Patrick Brown that he thinks he can win, or this is intentional sabotage. Because the way he's acting, thank God it's incompetent intentional sabotage, and they don't really understand people, so that helps. But he's intentionally trying to sabotage the Conservative Party, knowing that Pierre's going to win the leadership, pretending that Pierre is this crazed alt-right person. He keeps lying about Pierre and the convoy and accusing Pierre Poilievre of promoting white replacement theory.
He said that because Pierre Poilievre was for the Freedom Convoy, ergo Pierre Poilievre agrees with everything Pat King says, despite the fact that Pat King was not an organizer of the Freedom Convoy and is just some random crazy person the government's kind of trying to brand as like the Freedom Convoy guy. It's ridiculous. And honestly, the great thing for Pierre with the Patrick Brown attacks is that he's mirroring every single attack that Trudeau will try and use against Pierre.
Yeah, that's good. That is good. Like, yeah, the only good thing about this is you're right. Is it's good testing ground, and it's best when these attacks against someone aren't new. Like, I think it was Ben Shapiro's point on like how like everything with Trump is sort of baked into the cake already, right? When there would be a new Trump scandal in 2018, people are like, okay, it doesn't really affect Trump. Like the people who love Trump. The people who hate Trump, and the people who like everyone's views on Trump are already what they are. Like, there's nothing in 2019 that Donald Trump could do to make you think differently about him. Like, right? It is what it is. That being said, it's good that a lot of this attacks and Poilievre become a bit tired. So it's not like they can, new scandal, like Justin Trudeau calls Poilievre alt-right. It's like, we've seen this before. The defense is already put up there, right?
I think that's where I think that's why Justin Trudeau is that the reasons why the scandals are hurting him now was that before everyone knew that Justin Trudeau was a buffoon, he was kind of corrupt, but it was fun corrupt. He's kind of like that stylistically Toronto metropolitan corrupt. And now when it's just gotten sad, like he's just a sad liar, now this is what's actually hurting him because it's almost new information about Trudeau, is that Trudeau's not as slick as people think he is. And that's what these recent scandals are. But every single time Trudeau or the media slam Pierre as, he's staunchly conservative on this issue. And it's like, okay, what's new? Like he's a maverick? Okay, that's good. That's exactly what I expect from him. So all the attacks against Pierre is that he's Pierre Poilievre. And so there's really nowhere the media can go. He's basically just there. Like they take issue with the way that Pierre Poilievre is as a person.
Yeah, and the argument is like, the purple voter in Toronto, like a bunch of high-powered Bay Street lawyers might not like Pierre Poilievre. Like they try and sell that to everyday Canadians, like, be worried. Like, again, I can't see the comments, but like, how many of you in like Saskatchewan, if I had said, listen, that guy you're hanging out with, a lot of Bay Street lawyers don't like him. How many of you be like, oh no, like, well, why not? All like no one cares. No one cares outside of the media about all this. And I think a great way to wrap up the Patrick Brown topic is I won't be able to see the smile on your face, but Michelle Rempel leaving. I mean, everyone knows.
This is a great transition to the next topic.
Yeah. Okay. Transition. Next topic. Wyatt and Michelle Rempel are BFFs, best foes forever. And Wyatt famously wrote the Michelle Rempel is Krista Freeland in a cowboy hat article. So she has jumped ship from Patrick Brown, and she has gone into the UKIP race.
No, UC. Well, UKIP's in the UK, but UCP. So what happened was Michelle Rempel saw the writing on the wall with Patrick Brown that he sucks at campaigning far more than he. Okay. I think Patrick Brown's decent at campaigning, not that great. So he can put away someone like Christine Elliott, but he can't beat someone like Leslie Lewis or Pierre Poilievre or Roman Baber. He's like completely crappy against someone who's actually sincere and conservative like those people are. So he's lost his co-chair, Michelle Rempel, who then came back to Alberta and pretended like she was going to run in the UCP race. And at the same time, Patrick Brown's campaign manager jumped over and says, well, I'm going to go help Michelle Rempel run for the UCP leader. Then so she came over, sat around, put out a stupid survey saying, hey, Albertans, what issues are important to you? Which is insane that you would ever release that. It's basically saying, she basically came out and said, hey, I know I've been an MP since 2011. I don't know what Albertans think about politics. Can you tell me what you guys want? It was very sad. And then just like today, Michelle Rempel then decided that she's not going to run. Also, she didn't even qualify because she didn't even have a UCP membership, which much better candidates than her have been disqualified previously for, despite the fact that they only had like a membership lapse for a couple months. It's ridiculous. But I think that what we saw there is Michelle just wanted an excuse to leave Patrick Brown's campaign and was maybe thinking she'd run. I think her manager already knew she wasn't going to run. He just wanted an excuse to get off of Patrick Brown's campaign and pretend like he was doing some other project. I doubt he's going to go back to Patrick Brown's campaign after this.
Oh no, yeah, it's right. I mean, again, it's intentional sabotage, and I think people within the party. I mean, I've never accused the higher ups within the Conservative Party of having any sort of forward thinking or brains or intellectual capacity beyond that of a newt. But I think they even understand that, what Patrick Brown is doing is not good for us. Like, Patrick Brown is hurting the party long term. And however good is it to be associated with the Patrick Brown team that can bring in tons of money from nowhere at any time and like, boom, money, woo, which is usually what will be able to blind the Conservative Party. But here we have him intentionally and willfully maligning the party and setting himself like he's setting himself up for, like, in season 2, he's going to be the main villain. Like, after the hero, defeats the villain, which is Justin Trudeau, like, we're kind of having the origin story of, like, Patrick Brown as, like, the new villain in this story. Now, like, he's not going to be as big as Trudeau. That's silly. But, like, in, like, the narrative structure, like, nothing he's doing is good for the Conservative Party. Like, he will be on the CBC in 2 years crying about how mean the Conservative Party is every time they try and do something conservative. Like, Patrick Brown will be one of the media pundits brought on whatever mainstream outlet in 2025 to decry how horrible Pierre is when he says inflation is bad and caused by government spending.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and this is probably one of those things where I actually, as we're going forward, kind of want to talk more about the UCP leadership race as well, just because it's a great, I don't know, I think it's a great platform to be able to talk about how different leadership races operate, because I think the CPC one is kind of a little bit like, I don't want to disrespect Leslie Lewis or Roman Baber, but I think Pierre Poilievre kind of has the whole thing consolidated at this point. If he isn't your first pick, he's your second pick. So it's going to be very difficult for anyone to beat him unless he has some massive scandal. I think the UCP one is actually is going to be fairly interesting in terms of how you actually appeal to a conservative base. We're not talking about a full Canadian one where some people can run down the red Tory angle and some can't because, people are going to try to monopolize Toronto and some people want to monopolize Calgary. This is all in a conservative province of Alberta. And I just want to sort of, discuss it going forward, because it's very much a personality-based leadership race, because I don't think they're going to get that many people who are going to outright disagree with each other on policy as much as whether or not you trust different people. And then also, full disclosure, I'm acting as the campaign manager for one of the candidates. So I'm also being able to put a lot of the things I usually yell at other people's campaigns for into practice and demonstrate why they work. Not to be too meta about the thing.
That's a good point. It's like that's the UKIP. Like,
UCP.
I could keep saying UCP. I keep saying
UKIP, UK Independence Party.
I know. I guess there's this one video that Sargon Avocad did in 2019 for UKIP. I think I'm gonna shout it to you, where like he 2019 politics, and he's just being ridiculous. And it's one of the funniest videos I've ever seen, and that keeps getting in my brain. When we, challenges Fabian Picard to a duel. Okay, going on. What are the odds of getting a red Tory into leadership? This is what I want to know for someone in there. Like, what are the odds it's just another Jason Kenney?
Here, the best, I would say the most Jason Kenney-like candidate would be either Rebecca Schultz or Travis Taves. Travis Taves is the one who, as soon as he entered the race, got like 20 different cabinet ministers and UCP caucus members to endorse him. It looks like the most coordinated thing ever. He is the establishment guy. He is the basically continuation of Kenney. I think he assumed he could potentially win because Kenney won his leadership review, although he decided to resign afterwards, with 51.4% of the vote. Although that 51.4% is a good amount of support for someone in a poll against other people, the reason that was only a yes or no vote. The fact that he got only 51% is kind of sad. And you have to bake in the fact that I think people started jumping back over and voting for yes on Kenney, including myself, because we saw that like Brian Jean wanted to run or Danielle Smith wanted to run. And you were like, even if I agree with some of the things that they're saying, we're recycling people who already failed in the past, and we're just hoping that they're going to do it right this time. Like, the greatest recycling program in all of Canada is our ability to recycle old politicians and pretend like they're the ones who are going to fix your lives for you. And I would even probably agree with a lot of Danielle Smith's policies, although nobody's really releasing policies. But that's why I mean it's a purely ego-driven race so far. But the problem is do you expect her not to do a floor crossing sort of a thing again, like where she crossed from the Wild Rose Party as the party leader, brought some MLAs with her, and then just joined the PCs, even though the whole point of the Wild Rose Party was to oppose the PC party's shift to the left. And that's where it's sort of the problem with certain things that she's doing, is that although she's saying all the right things on lockdowns, mandates, and Alberta sovereignty and autonomy, well, do I actually expect her to do it based on her track record? And that's pretty much the story with all the candidates. Do you expect that Brian Jean's actually going to become conservative again, despite the fact that as Wild Rose leader in a party where people expect him to be as conservative as humanly possible, he tried jamming through a carbon tax and putting it into the platform? There's videos of him from back when he was in federal parliament advocating for cap and trade policies. Like, everyone has these very mixed records where you can see that they're very pragmatic, and sometimes the pragmatic policy at a certain time is very popular. But when you see all these people who are pragmatists, it's harder to trust whether or not they're actually going to do what they say. And again, like, for the disclosure, I'm managing Bill Rock's campaign. And so far, what we've been doing is actually releasing policies and putting all sort of our cards on the table and saying, this is what we do, and you can hold us to account because we've actually said what we're not going to do. We're not just making speeches about how, you know what, leadership's good and I'm a leader and I'm going to win the next election. Rachel Notley's not a leader, I'm a leader kind of stuff.
Yeah, okay, that is some good points. Right now, just going on to different live chats and checking. I'm just checking the comments and see if there's any sort of stuff we want to bring up. Well, so I mean, unless you can pull one out of your hat there, Wyatt, I do think we're going to get another, corporatist conservative in Alberta, where it's like, yeah, he's conservative, do some lip services, but is there anyone in the race who really has the ability to fight the federal carbon tax and like not give in, like use the notwithstanding clause and then like threaten, like, no, we'll just not, okay, fine, like we're doing this, no more oil, like, no, we're not like, oh, you want to block our oil? Okay, it's like, fine, we're there. Like, play stupid games, win stupid prizes.
I think most of them would say that they would do something like, I'm gonna be tough on the federal government. I'm not sure if you would. The only problem with trying to turn off the taps is that because it's like a privatized system, you would have to literally commandeer pipelines to be able to stop them from pushing out oil. But it's more of on something like the equalization payments, that you just start slow walking equalization payments. A province that needs to fill a budget deficit and desperately needs that money to be able to pay for certain things, like, yeah, maybe it just doesn't arrive for a month for some reason, and maybe we'll negotiate if it's going to arrive on next month. That's something more I could see certain people doing, and I would even agree with Beatrice. I think Todd Loewen is probably someone a little bit more honest in the race. I wanted Drew Barnes to also run. Like, I'm managing Bill Rock's campaign. I think he'd be a very good candidate, and he's the type of guy who literally is a mayor of a small town, where he's the guy who fixes the water main breaks and clearly is not the mayor because of all the perks. It's more so because he actually likes, the public service element of the whole thing. I think if you kind of got like a Bill Rock, Todd Loewen, maybe Danielle Smith, that they would maybe actually do something aggressive towards the federal government to put pressure on them to actually give Alberta back more control and, lower some of the equalization payment, or lower or eliminate the equalization payments and stuff like that. But again, the problem with a lot of the candidates is that they haven't actually released any of the policies. And on the carbon tax, I think we're definitely the only ones who said that we're going to scrap the industrial carbon tax in Alberta, because people don't know this because everyone ignores it. Alberta also has a carbon tax for industrial, quote unquote, big emitters. Yet no one ever actually challenges to get rid of it because it's easier to just blame Justin Trudeau for all the carbon taxes.
Yeah, that's the sad thing in politics, is if when there's an excuse available, the politicians will do nothing because they have a built-in excuse, which is like COVID has lasted so long, because COVID is a great excuse for so many levels of incompetence. And then it's great to shift onto the Russia-Ukraine stuff. Oh, well, inflation. Well, it's like, well, all the things you did to COVID caused this inflation. No, that was Russia. right?
Yeah.
We'd be in a much better position. Oh, our genius plan of printing lots of money would have 0 negative side effects had the Russians not invaded Ukraine.
Well, that's why it's sort of silly when, and again, like I don't mind Daniel Smith exactly as a candidate, but she put out this video the other day that was decently popular, saying I'm never going to implement another lockdown again or COVID-19 mandate, and I'm like, great. Are you also against burning witches at the stake? Like things that nobody will ever do again because it would be political suicide as a conservative to do it. Like, it's not really substantial policy to say I'm not going to do the thing that no one wants me to do. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, you're right. In Alberta, that's saying nothing. In Ontario, that's a something.
Yeah, and that, like, especially Toronto, if you're like running for the mayor of Toronto and you say that, that's like, wow, that's actually kind of a big policy. But when you're in Alberta and you say, that I'm against the carbon tax, it's like, cool, are you going to get rid of our industrial carbon tax? And when everyone kind of clams up, it's a little odd. It's like how we've been hearing people going to Travis Taves meetings and saying, are you in favor of recall election reform? And he says like, yeah, and I guess I'll figure out what I do on that. And because he doesn't want to actually reform our recall election laws. Like our recall election law currently sucks. You need 40% of people in a riding to sign a petition to hold a recall election. In terms of like school board trustees, city councilors, mayors, and MLAs, that's a ridiculous amount of votes signatures to have to get. So I'd want to lower it to 51% of the number of votes cast. So depending on how many people voted, it actually might not be that hard to gather signatures. It's not easy either, but 12 citizens in that area who are dedicated to gathering the signatures could pull off 5,000 signatures, 6,000 in like 60 days that you need them for. Not something ridiculous, because of course after that the person still gets to defend themselves in the recall election, which is completely fair. But 40%, you could never lose an election again if you had 40% of eligible voters who would actually show up and vote for something. It's silly, but again, it's one of those things where you'll ask them and people will make sort of positive sounding beeping noises about it, and then they'll just never talk about it again. Like, oh, I guess I am in favor of recall election reform, but because they're not actually putting their policy that they're in favor of on paper, it's harder to hold them to account. So it's only about the 500 people who really wanted to see that addressed who will be mad, and everyone else already has their other pet issues that they're mad about. So people can't really consolidate on certain promises that you've made and not kept.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think we covered a lot this hour. Anything else needs to go on?
No, but I guess everyone could maybe in the comment section, because I'll go and look at the newest comments. Everyone can post maybe what they'd like us to talk about for our next episode, either Tuesday or Thursday. Just to see what people sort of wanted to hear about. Since we have been away for a little bit, it would be good to see what people want us to catch up on, if there's anything that we might have neglected over the past few weeks.
Yeah, and I will not look at them because I cannot look at them right now.
Because
I have to go into different apps and search around. But Wyatt will bring them up, and then Wyatt can post them.
Facebook's the easiest to do it. Either Facebook or YouTube comment sections are the best because I can actually check those. If you go to Twitter, it'll be a little bit harder.
Yeah. Twitter's a difficult one to do there.
Yeah. Anyways, we'll see everyone here next week at the same bat time and same bat place. Daniel wants you to get a tattoo of his face onto your face and whatever else he usually says.